I'm excited to give you a sneak peek at the new IMUNES version 3. It's currently in beta, as we're still testing both the existing features and the new ones. Of course, we're also busy fixing bugs along the way. I'll explain major changes, their upsides, and I'll mention some possible bad news they bring. Here's a list of all the updates, and I've timestamped them in the video if you'd like to skip directly to them. The new IMUNES file format still uses the .imn extension, but instead of a custom text configuration format, it's now based on the well-known JSON standard. Here you can see the same topology in both formats side by side. Now you don't have to edit this file manually, but since this was the first step toward the new version of IMUNES, I had to mention it. Switching to JSON has enabled us to introduce new features and simplify development in the long run. In fact, some future features, like creating an API or a web-based frontend, depend on this change, so making the switch was an easy decision. You will get a warning when opening an old topology, as you can see here. Each new topology file will now include IMUNES configuration version, starting with 1, which makes managing changes in future versions much easier. The new IMUNES is compatible with the old format and should open almost all of your existing topologies without any changes in functionality. There is one exception, but we'll talk more about this in the custom configurations chapter. To simplify the conversion process, we've added a new flag in IMUNES. If you run IMUNES -convert old topology, it will generate the new format in the same directory, prefixed with JSON_. Well, there aren't any bad news, so let's skip to the next feature. The biggest new feature in IMUNES version 3 is live mode. This allows you to edit your topology while the experiment is running. I've started one simple experiment to show you what I mean. So instead of stopping everything to make changes, you can now add, edit, or remove nodes, interfaces, and links on the fly while the experiment is running. Additionally, you can start and stop the existing nodes individually. This means you can initialize or destroy their jails or Docker containers. You can also unconfigure and configure nodes. And just to clarify, unconfiguring a node means running commands which emulate node shutdown, so killing startup applications and removing the default routes, while configuring means running commands emulating the node's startup, for example, running some application or adding default routes. You can also pause the experiment execution. If you want to make multiple changes without interrupting the experiment flow, you can pause the execution, adjust the topology however you like, and then you resume the experiment. IMUNES will automatically update and apply those changes and will leave you with the latest experiment snapshot. Due to extra steps involved in managing the execution and termination of nodes, interfaces, and links, along with additional error checks, you may notice a decrease in the speed of experiment execution and termination. This slowdown will be more noticeable on Linux, as Docker is quite slower than jails on FreeBSD. Another thing, as you may have noticed, the meaning of start node and stop node has changed. These now refer to creating or destroying the node, jail, or container, rather than starting or stopping all processes. To start or stop all configured processes, you'll need to use the configure node and unconfigure node menus instead. With the separation of node configuration from interfaces configuration, the way custom configurations are handled has also changed. The GUI now has two separate menus, one for custom configuration and another for interfaces custom configuration. So if your custom configuration doesn't need to modify interfaces, you can keep them synced with the default configuration. I mentioned earlier that old custom configurations for nodes are not compatible with the new format. This means you will need to manually update your custom configurations. You can either move the interface-related configurations to the Interfaces custom configuration menu, or remove them altogether if you prefer to use the IMUNES defaults. If for any reason the creation or configuration of your node or its interfaces doesn't run or takes too long to finish, it will be skipped and IMUNES will notify you that an error has occurred. This improves the way experiment failures are handled. You no longer need to restart the entire experiment, just the node that encountered the error. The timeout is currently unconfigurable and is hard-coded to 3 seconds. If your node's startup script takes longer than that, it will result in an error. However, the node will continue its configuration in the background, which may mean the error is a false positive. There is a future feature planned which will enable you to skip error checks on individual nodes. You can now steal interfaces from the host and give them to nodes, making it appear as though they are inside the node. This approach is more intuitive compared to using RJ45 nodes for the same purpose in the previous version. No bad news here. The recently introduced external element node has been merged into the RJ45 node. The RJ45 node now functions as a replacement, allowing multiple links to be connected to it and enabling it to behave like the external element. Topologies that include external elements from older versions are automatically converted to RJ45 nodes with multiple interfaces. As with the old RJ45 nodes, you can now add VLANs to each interface, a feature that wasn't previously available with external element nodes. No bad news here either. You can now add interfaces without linking them to other nodes. This feature also allows you to remove links and nodes without deleting interfaces from their peers. On Linux, this cannot be done while the experiment is running if the interfaces are part of direct links. On FreeBSD this is possible but not fully implemented yet, so it's disabled for now. It's now possible to connect a node to itself, because why not? Again, no bad news here. You can now separately start and stop node and interfaces configurations. There's also the Connect Interface menu, which makes it possible to connect new or empty interfaces to other nodes. Additionally, we've added an option to snoop on the any interface using Wireshark or TCP dump. Note that this feature is only available on Linux. We've fixed various GUI and non-GUI bugs. But as is often the case, we're sure that there are some new bugs. Looking ahead, we plan to separate the GUI or front-end from the functional part or backend. This will allow us to implement an API and potentially create a remote web-based GUI. Additionally, we're planning to introduce more custom configuration hooks, similar to the custom node and interfaces configurations we've added. For example, this will include custom unconfiguration of nodes and interfaces. Some minor new features are already in the making, and they will be covered in the next videos. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Until next time.